Tuesday, June 4. This is the news on PBCJ. I am Simone Absalom. There has been a significant improvement in the water level at the Hermitage Dam in St. Andrew, as sections of the island continue to experience increased rainfall. The National Water Commission on Monday reported that the dam is now at 65.8% capacity. It had plunged to 30.3% 3 weeks ago. However, the Mona Reservoir did not see such a drastic improvement. The reservoir is now at 36% of capacity after falling to 29.1% last month. Despite the continued improvement in the levels of catchment, the facilities across the country, the NWC said the prohibition. Despite the continued improvement in levels at catchment facilities across the country, the NWC said the prohibition notice has not been lifted. On May 21, the National Water Commission issued a prohibition order making it prosecutable offense to waste water or use excessive amounts of potable water for non-essential purposes. Between June 19 and June 22, the island will officially mourn the passing of Jamaica's fifth former Prime Minister, Edward Seaga. His life will be celebrated in an ecumenical service at the Cathedral of the Most Holy Trinity on North Street, Kingston, on June 23. Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport Minister Olivia Grange yesterday provided details of activities leading up to the state funeral at a press conference at Jamaica House in St. Andrew.
On Wednesday, June 19 to June 22nd, June 19 to June 22nd will be declared the official period of mourning. Flags to be flown at half-mast. And on that day, his body will lie in state in Kingston at the National Arena. Also, on June 19, there will be a special sitting of both Houses of Parliament in tribute to the Most Honorable Edward Seaga.
Minister Grange said government social activities are to be put on hold during the period of mourning, while travel by state officials will be limited. In response to a query as to why a larger venue was not chosen, Grange said that the funeral, scheduled for midday, was being held at the cathedral because Seaga's family wanted the service to be held in a church.
It was a difficult decision to make, but the family wanted the service to be held in a church.
The Cathedral of the Most Holy Trinity has in the past been the venue of state funerals and memorial services for prominent public figures, including former Prime Minister Michael Manley in March 1997. Seaga's remains will be interred at the National Heroes Park. A host of activities have been planned to reflect Mr. Seaga's contributions to nation building, the arts and to the political arena. The minister outlined the activities.
On Tuesday, June 18, the Arts in Tribute will be held, and the Arts in Tribute to the Most Honorable Edward Seaga will be held at the Little Theatre in Kingston, featuring the National Dance Theatre Company, of which he was the last remaining patron. On Wednesday, June 5, will be 9 days after the transition of Mr. Seaga. And as you all know, our tradition is to observe the 9th night. And so the 9th night will be held in the Tivoli Garden Square on Wednesday, June 5, starting at 7:30 p.m.
Mr. Seaga's body was flown home Sunday evening, arriving at the Norman Manley International Airport in Kingston to be received by his family, government and opposition officials. He died last Tuesday on his 89th birthday at a hospital in Florida. Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport Minister Olivia Grange says the media owes the government an apology for breaching an embargo order and releasing an outline of activities surrounding the celebration of the life of late Prime Minister Edward Seaga. On Sunday, a media outlet released the details into the public.
We decided to invite representatives from the production entities of the electronic media to a briefing just for their information and to assist in facilitating the efficient organization. However, the confidence that we had in this group and the embargo that we had on information was breached. And I just want to put on record that the family, the Prime Minister, and the government of Jamaica is owed an apology by the media for doing that. Because what happened was the information was carried, or it was not confirmed information, it was carried, it created a lot of discomfort and unease and embarrassment. And it is most unfortunate that that happened. And I really wanted to put it on the record.
Minister Grange was addressing a press conference at the Jamaica House on Monday. The government is prioritizing development of policies and laws aimed at supporting the structured use of enhanced security measures by the security forces. That was one of the outcomes of the monthly sitting of the National Security Council, which was chaired by Prime Minister Andrew Holness last Thursday. The Prime Minister, in a statement last week, indicated that the legislations on the agenda include the proposed Law Enforcement Protection of Integrity Bill and amendments to the Firearms Act. The proposed law is geared at establishing a more robust mechanism to protect and strengthen the integrity of law enforcement officials to ensure that they are held to the highest levels of integrity and accountability. The amendments to the Firearms Act are also being prioritized as a key feature of the response to the current threat to the environment. He reiterated that the government is committed to providing the necessary resources, ensuring that all the requisite national efforts are aligned to respond to the, quote, triple threat, end quote, of dons, gangs, and guns. The Tourism Ministry is insisting Jamaica is one of the safest countries for visitors amid continued bad press internationally in relation to sexual assault and harassment of hotel guests. A report on the Detroit Free Press website last week said a new safety tool on influential travel website TripAdvisor has flagged 13 Jamaican properties for safety issues since it was introduced in mid-May. Senior strategist in the Ministry of Tourism, Delana Seavright, says while there are issues related to crime and sexual harassment, the data do not show that tourists feel unsafe in Jamaica. Seavright also notes that the government is taking steps to deal with sexual harassment locally. Meanwhile, a team is expected to conduct a security audit of tourism properties in Jamaica within the next few weeks. It's expected to develop a further guideline and protocols to govern hotel and guest relations. Members of Parliament are expected to close the debate on the Law Reform Amendment Penalties Act 2019. The Law Reform Amendment of Penalties Act 2019 was tabled in the House of Representatives on February 5. According to the Memorandum of Objects and Reasons, a decision has been taken to revise penalties where appropriate and where not already provided for, provide a mechanism for amendment of monetary penalties relating to several acts under the portfolio of the Ministry of Justice by ministerial order. Director General of the Planning Institute of Jamaica, the PIOJ, Dr. Wayne Henry, is reporting notable gains under the National Development Plan Vision 2030 Jamaica for the medium-term framework. That's the MTF period between 2015 to 2018. The MTF is the main mechanism for translating Vision 2030, Jamaica's long-term national goals and outcomes, into action. Dr. Henry, who was addressing the recent quarterly briefing at the PIOJ's head office in New Kingston, said improvements were recorded under Goal 3, Jamaica's economy is prosperous, and Goal 1, Jamaicans are empowered to achieve their fullest potential. He cited growth in the tourism and agricultural industries, with the former meeting the majority of its 2018 targets, while noting that the target for further reduction in unemployment was also met. Overall, 67 national outcome indicators monitored under Vision 2030 Jamaica have recorded improvements under successive 3-year MTFs spanning 2009 to 2018, representing a 61.2% outturn. Is your organization deaf-friendly? Do you practice deaf etiquette? In addition to educational and clinical support, communication support outside of the classroom is a major focus for the Jamaica Association for the Deaf. In this second of a two-part report on the JAD's work for the development of deaf Jamaicans, we'll hear more about the ways in which society can promote inclusivity of deaf and hard of hearing Jamaicans. The Jamaica Association for the Deaf has been working with the USAID to advance their services through a partnership for literacy enhancement for the deaf. The project, which included training and resource development, ends in April 2020. But Executive Director Kimberly Sherlock Marriott Blake says there is more to be done, and not necessarily in the area of funding.
One of the other things that still hasn't been addressed just yet is ensuring that all resources are provided in a mode of communication that a deaf child can appreciate. Our literature books, for example, our literature books are all presented in written English, and if you were to watch a movie, 9 out of 10 those movies connecting to those books aren't in sign language or don't have any closed captions to support a student who is deaf.
Mrs. Sherlock Marriott Blake says the way in which businesses and agencies engage clients who are deaf and hard of hearing needs improvement.
The partnerships we're looking at is not necessarily just to increase our funding, but also to begin to get some of the service providers on the outside, some of the individuals who we engage with, to begin to look at policy change, to look at changes in how they engage with clientele. And of course, to see if there's any way that when they are developing resources and developing support services for Jamaicans, they are including the deaf community in that work.
The issue of communication with service givers is a serious one. We spoke with one JAD trainer, Kamar Groves, who gave us some insight from his personal experience.
How do you interact with your doctor when you're deaf?
Well, let me see. It's a challenge, yes, for a really long time now. For me personally, if I do visit a doctor, I tend to do what? Get an interpreter. That is the first option. Well, my wife, of course. Well, a few times I would have to write by communicating with the doctor. But sometimes I have an issue. I have a problem with understanding the doctor's handwriting because sometimes it can be really hard to understand. So that's my personal experience. So I try to train different doctors by having sensitization sessions where we travel, get different groups of persons from the medical fraternity, and to see how best we can find a way how they can communicate with a deaf person. For example, we have some sentences that may be a little bit misunderstanding very easily. So you may have a surgery, and the deaf may understand that you may have a surgery in May, I should say. So sometimes the deaf person may misunderstand that, how they can write in a way where the deaf can understand that they may have a surgery in May. So the communication can be a little bit of a problem there.
The JAD's executive director says support from the government has been great. The Education Ministry has given significant financial support.
We have a partnership with the Ministry of Justice to support interpreting in the court system, and we have building relationships with the Ministry of Health through our clinical services with our hearing services unit. So saying that we don't have partnerships would be incorrect. Saying that there are areas where partnerships could be stronger is definitely where I'd take it.
The Disabilities Act protects and promotes the equal rights of the disabled and prohibits discrimination against them. It is in keeping with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of PWDs, persons with disabilities, which Jamaica has signed and agreed to. Key areas of compliance under the Act includes the provision of a disability certificate, the right to education and training, the right to employment, the right to adequate health care and accessible facilities, the right to housing and to enter premises, the work of the new Jamaica Council for PWDs and the Disabilities Tribunal, the right to access public passenger vehicles, the right to participate in public office and political life. Mrs. Sherlock Marriott Blake expects more opportunities as the Act is further implemented.
Companies can decide that they want to sensitize the entire staff complement. They may decide they want to sensitize their frontline staff, and they can contact us. We discuss with them what their needs are and the kind of services they provide. So for example, if you are a provider in technology, then this sign makes a difference because it's the sign for technology. And so we would come in, provide that sensitization, help them to understand how their physical space can be more deaf-friendly and inclusive.
Simone Absalom, PBCJ News. In regional news, Canada has announced that it is shutting down its embassy in Venezuelan capital Caracas temporarily. Canada said the decision was due to President Nicolas Maduro's government taking steps to limit the ability of foreign embassies to function. Canadian Foreign Minister Chrystia Freeland said her government had been left with no choice because Canadian diplomats' visas were expiring at the end of the month. She said the visa could not be renewed as Canada was no longer in a position to obtain diplomatic accreditation under the Maduro regime. Canada is one of more than 50 nations that recognize opposition leader Juan Guaido as Venezuela's acting president. In sports, Reggae Boys skipper Andre Blake says he and other members of the team have opened their arms to welcome newcomer wide attacker Leon Bailey. The 21-year-old Bayer Leverkusen winger's selection to the senior Jamaica team was stalled by a long-running boardroom squabble with the Jamaica Football Federation and the player's personal manager and adopted father, Craig Butler. But with all of that seemingly in the past, the exciting winger is now set to make his long-awaited debut for the senior boys when they take on the USA in a friendly international in Washington, D.C. tomorrow. Game time, 6 p.m. Jamaica time. And that's the news. Thank you so much for watching.